Thanks for joining us tonight. Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance speaking exclusively to Action 2 News tonight while making a stop in northeast Wisconsin for a rally in Pere. That event, to address concerns over inflation and economy, marks the fourth trip to Wisconsin for Vance just this month. Chief political reporter Jason Zimmerman was able to question Vance on a number of big issues. He's live in the studio with more on that. Jason.
Bill, J.D. Vance gave us about 5 minutes to ask whatever we wanted. I focused on questions that often come up on the campaign trail, specifically how he would stop rising prices, handle the conflict on abortion, and secure the border, just to get us started.
Thank you all. It is great to be in Pere, Wisconsin. Thank you.
Taking the stage in Pere before hundreds of people filling the Amerilux warehouse, Donald Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, addressing concerns about the economy and inflation. But during a brief one-on-one interview, we wanted to know specifics on how he would reverse rising prices.
President Trump and I believe is that we have to unleash the American worker, unleash American energy, drill more in our own country. That'll drive down the cost of energy and drive down the cost of everything in the process.
On the issue of abortion, Vance says it's up to each individual state to decide how to proceed. But Democrats say, you know, given the chance, you would sign a national abortion ban. Are they correct in saying that?
No, not at all. Look, the president has been very clear that he wants California to be able to make its abortion policy, Ohio and Wisconsin to make their abortion policy. And look, the voters of these states are going to come down on different sides of this issue. The voters should ultimately decide, not the national government.
On the issue of securing the border, and what happens to the people who have already crossed and are already right here in this country right now?
Well, first of all, we have to remember, we have to stop the bleeding here. Kamala Harris said that on day one she wanted to suspend deportation. She did. She wanted to stop President Trump's very successful Remain in Mexico policy, and she did. We are now living with the consequences of it. Now, of course, once you stop the bleeding and stop the flow of illegal immigration, you've got to figure out what to do with the people. I think we focus on that criminal migrant population, the people who've committed violent crimes, deport them, and then figure out where you are from there. But you got to stop the bleeding, and you got to get the violent criminals out of this country.
Vance also taking a shot at Vice President Kamala Harris for not doing the media interviews he is. Harris is expected to sit down with CNN on Thursday.
She needs to answer for her record, and instead of pretending that she agrees with Donald Trump on every issue, she needs to actually answer, why isn't she doing anything about it now?
As we mentioned, this is the fourth visit to Wisconsin just this month for J.D. Vance, who's also held rallies in Eau Claire, Milwaukee, and Kenosha. Plenty of supporters tonight in Pere, also making their voices heard.
He really connects with the common people on that level, and yet I know he knows a lot more about what's going on in the world, in our country, in this state.
All of this as former President Donald Trump prepares to hold a town hall event tomorrow night in La Crosse. Vice President Kamala Harris' campaign released a statement ahead of the visit saying, quote, when your only plan for the people of Wisconsin is raising middle-class taxes by $3,900 a year, cutting Social Security and Medicare, and ripping away reproductive freedom, it's no wonder J.D. Vance doesn't want to talk about his own agenda, end quote. Bill, back to you.